Hello, podcast listener. This is your host with the most, JJ. This episode of JJ Meets World features Amber Rae. We talk about a movie that she, Tucker, and I made in the early 2000s. And no, don't worry, there's no place to find it online yet. And you will also hear a little memory I have from driving around late at night with my buddies. All of this and so much more on this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
When I was a sophomore in high school, I vividly remember one night driving around with my friends, not going anywhere, just driving. And it wasn't cruising, because cruising to me is you go up and down the same street or highway and you're looking for other people, right?
Yeah, there's a goal with that.
Yeah. We were just driving around and we end up in a cul-de-sac neighborhood. And in the middle of the road, this is probably like 2:30 in the morning, in the middle of the road, there are a ton of magazines, probably like 4 houses long. The road was probably scattered with like 70 to 80 magazines. So we stop the car, middle of the road, we get out and we go grab them. And in the headlights, you can see like, oh my gosh, these are adult magazines. And so we grab up a handful each and we bring them back in the car. Well, they weren't the adult magazines that we were kind of hoping for, you know, as kids who were, remember, this is before the internet was really what it is today. And we're not old enough to go to, you know, a gas station and pick up something like this. They were like Muscle Men magazines. That were clearly made for for sexual purposes.
Okay.
And so we got in there, and I remember my friend Jay Scott from the back going like, "Hey guys, just a quick thought. Think about the person who is interacting with these before we grab them and touch them with our bare hands, and where we are right now." And so we didn't want to throw them out of the car because we just thought, what if one of the neighbors sees us and they write down a license plate and they're like, yeah, I saw these 4 boys throwing all of these magazines into the street. Must have been 70 or 80 of them. So we kept those in my car. And I kind of didn't know what to do with them, right? I didn't want to throw them in the garbage at my house for fear that someone was going to be like, well, I'm going to take out the trash. And, well, my, what's this at the bottom of our garbage can? And so it's probably like 2 months that these were just in the way back end of my car, to the point of where I kind of forgot that they were even there. And I was like, I need to wash my car. And so I'm pulling everything out of my car and I'm chatting with my mom at the time. And all of a sudden it's like I pull a blanket away and expose these dozen like Muscle Man magazines. And my mom just goes, oh. And at the time I was mortified and I tried to explain this and she goes, when did this happen? And I'm like, 2 months ago. And she goes, you've held on to them for 2 months? And I just like, this is just getting worse and worse and worse. And so that is something I think about anytime I pass a magazine rack. I think about this one moment in my life, and I can vividly remember being inside that car and driving around and the guys I was with and how much of a joke this has become to us as years go on. And to me, I think there's a lot of those moments in your life where you don't realize how big that moment is going to be or how important of a memory it is.
How much you'll miss it.
Yeah, until later on. And this episode of JJ Meets World dives into one of those times in my life, and Tucker, I believe in your life as well.
Oh yeah, big time. We today we talk with Amber Rae, who's a good friend of ours. She hasn't lived in Fargo for a long time, but we get into it in the podcast. Shortly after high school, I fell into the local theater crowd, which Amber was one of the leaders of, and we ended up making a movie together called Mercedes Rae versus the former presidents of the United States of America, which JJ was also a very big part of.
And you get a great behind the scenes look at, or behind the scenes feel of what Mercedes Rae is, the making of it, and we just fall instantly back in sync with Amber. We also talk a lot about what the future might hold for the groups of people out there who are creating, whether you're in theater or you're a traditional artist, whatever medium you work in. We get a chance to chat about what that is going to look like and what it's going to take and cost to get the world back to a place of where it feels like they can go back out to theater or they can be at gallery openings. It's just a wonderful discussion that we have. So listen, I want to ask one last thing of you real quick. If you have time and you're willing to go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. We would appreciate it. You can also donate to our Patreon. Thank you to the patrons that we have on Patreon. In fact, I just noticed this. We have a patron who, by the time this airs, will have donated over $500 to JJ Meets World. And so thank you very much. That helps us keep the equipment up to date. It costs money to host this thing. And Tucker and I also have a Fabergé egg addiction that you're also helping fuel. So it really helps on every level you can do there. And then, of course, too, if you have a favorite episode of this and somebody is asking on social media, like, gosh, I wish I knew of a great podcast to listen to, you can help be the street team for JJ Meets World and share some of that out there. Tell them what your favorite episode is, and we'll continue to build this audience. 2 episodes every week. We couldn't be more happy or humble that you're listening to this podcast. So without further array, here's Array in Amber Rae on JJ Meets World.
JJ Meets World.
Amber Rae, welcome to JJ Meets World. Also, it's probably been close to 6 years since I've talked to you.
At least. I was thinking that while I was waiting for you guys to come on, that I can't remember the last time I saw you, JJ. I mean, your whole world has changed. Somebody married you, which is crazy. Congrats. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah,
And,
I don't know how I tricked her, but I did.
You did good. You did good. And she lucked out. So good for you guys. And Tucker, we've talked a little bit recently, but I haven't seen you in years either. So it's been a while. And I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, a lot of things have changed for you, Amber. I mean, you've got a husband, you've got 2 beautiful baby boys. You're living it up. So I hope you're doing well in all this COVID craziness with the 4 of you all cramped together.
It's funny. We have a small house. We're tiny housers, and my children are 7 and 4 and loud, and they've been cooped up in this house now for almost 2 months. And so I am, as we speak, in my camper. I have come out to my camper in my yard because the only place on my property that you can hear me. So I'm all cozied up in my camper with my Sherpa and my coffee, and I love it. My summer home.
I think it's a great move. You got to find your own personal space, and girl, you did it. Also, this is a little inside baseball, but hopefully we'll find out after Tucker masters this episode, but the processor on your computer makes this little tiny hum noise, which sounds like if you've ever talked to somebody who is out on the beach of a lake and there's a small trolling boat going by in the distance and it's just the consistent noise. That is what we heard at the very beginning. And in this time when everything is being done via video conferencing, does that audio pick up whenever you're video conferencing? Because it's got to just be hilarious to the people that you're on.
Nobody has ever said anything about it, but I'm going to pretend now that I'm on a boat. If anybody asks, I'm be like, well, I'm on a boat.
Yeah, right?
I'll just say that. I didn't notice it the few times I've done, and we can get into this later. My boss is he's a boomer, so he's very big in person stuff. So I've had a surprisingly limited amount of Zoom conference over the last couple of months. But I had to send in an audition, and I recorded it off this, and it was horrid. And I actually apologized in the recording. I was like, I don't know why it's doing that, but sorry about it. I'm on my boat. What can I do?
Yeah, be like, I'm sorry. I picked up a temporary job working for the DNR, and I'm just making sure that there aren't poachers. Doing what I need to do. I remember at one point I had a vehicle that had a hole in one of the pipes before it gets to the muffler. And so you could hear my car from like a block away, and it made this horrible, horrible noise. And I went to a barbecue at Tucker's house one night when he was living with Brad and Sarah, and I arrived and somebody said, "Hey man, your car sounds like crap." And I don't know why I said, but I'm like, actually, I put this new fuel efficient thing in there so that it's running on, like a lower amount of octane, and I'm actually using some restaurant grease to, get it. I'm trying to be environmentally conscious. They're like, oh yeah. I mean, you can barely hear it.
That's amazing.
Right?
That's amazing.
Shut up, haters.
I think I remember that car. And that's a way back when Tucker was living with Brad and Sarah. That was like 20 years ago, right? I mean, that was a long time ago.
That was like 40 years ago. I mean, it was absolutely forever ago. It feels like it.
I remember that house and that crappy lawn. And Brad had one of those push mowers, like the with no motor.
Yeah.
And he'd go out there and mow his dirt. Yeah, that was when we were pretending to be grown-ups. I love it.
Well, and so that is the era I most associate my time with you, because it was right around that time that we made Mercedes Rae.
Yes.
And what a wonderful summer that was. If you don't mind, I'd kind of like to start there, because we haven't talked about this on JJ Meets World, which is, the Mercedes Rae, which Tucker was kind enough to give some credit to me, but I really didn't do much on it. I moved lights when he needed it, and I was told my mom and sister, like, hey, go wait in the bedroom. We're going to use the main floor of the house for some shooting. And then I terrified my neighbors with an all-president dance party. But, Tucker and Amber, I'd kind of like to hear you guys talk a little about that, because Amber, you were the lead, you were the star of the movie itself.
That's so crazy.
And Tucker, you put this whole thing together, man.
Yeah. So just some context for the listeners. So I started fancying myself as being a filmmaker back in high school, and a couple years after high school, I fell in with like the local theater crowds here in Fargo, which is how I met Amber. I'd known JJ for a while, and I wanted to make something new. And I was still very much learning how filmmaking worked. I didn't even really know how to white balance a camera yet. And I was just kind of shooting from the hip. And I wrote basically half of a script called Mercedes Rae versus the former presidents of the United States of America, and asked Amber, was like, hey, Amber, do you want to do this? And she was like, yeah, I don't got anything else going on. Let's do it. And so Amber was both a producer on it, and then she was the lead. And the premise of the movie was that she plays a time traveler named Mercedes Rae, who makes a living by stealing items from the past and then pawning them off to like antique shops and stuff in the present. And what happens is she goes back to Ford's Theater to steal some stuff, and the time machine gets a stowaway in Abraham Lincoln, who ends up taking over the time machine, and he gets Thomas Jefferson when he figures out how it works, and they decide to throw a kegger in the present with only former U.S. presidents. And of course, I said I had half of a script. We started shooting it, and I was like, I don't know how this thing ends yet. And so I ended up going, well, I've got this melted gorilla costume, and JJ has roughly the dimensions of a gorilla. So what I'll do is when she needs to fight them all off, she'll go and she'll get a lowland gorilla, and that will somehow solve the movie, which I guess it kind of does.
It does. Bananas. That was his name.
I got heat stroke in that costume.
JJ, do you remember, and this is probably getting ahead of us on this, but one of my very favorite scenes in retrospect of this whole thing was JJ and I are both very strong personalities. I think that's safe to say. We've both grown up to the point where we can admit who we are and be proud of it. And so, and we're both very, I don't know, just very driven and outspoken. And so as producers on this thing, we had an interesting relationship. And people started to kind of play into that with us and sort of, we became frenemies, for lack of a better word. But for the record, Jage, I've always loved you and just thought you were amazing. So it was more fun to pretend that we were bickering than the other. But anyway, so we were both, we're working on this project and we're going back and forth. And by the time we had to shoot the scene where I go get the gorilla and JJ's in the suit, we just, like, all of the summer of tension, we literally, it was an actual fight. Like, we actually fought. And I got hurt. You hurt my back because you can see it in the film, the clip that's used. I put my
hands on the ground.
You threw me down, and then I put my legs up to stop you, and you jumped onto my legs, and it crunched my lower spine. And I was like, oh, it was blinding. But God damn, that was fun. And it was great. After that gorilla fight, we were like, that's awesome. We're best friends now.
Isn't it amazing how sometimes you just need to release the tension just a little bit, and then you're good to go?
And we're both, I don't know about you, but I'm a fighter. I like to fight. I like to scrap. And so it was cool. That was one of my favorite moments to shoot.
That was probably the first time I've ever worked with somebody who shares what I would consider the same level, if not more, passion for what they're working on. And this desire for it to be, not just good, but to be fulfilling. For, you're putting all this time and effort into it. You want to walk away and make it feel really good. And usually I pick projects where I'm the only person who feels that. Like, that's why I direct children's theater. Because the children are all like, we want to be in costumes. And I'm like, damn it, I want people to cry at the end of this play. And so getting to work with you in that fact was like, I had to learn a completely different style of teamwork, and I failed in certain parts. And then I think, like, you taught me a lot about working together with someone else, but I am really proud of what we ended up with, considering, considering
that I did not know at all what the hell I was doing, which is typically.
Go ahead, Tucker. Sorry.
Well, that's just typically how I learn things, though, is I don't go, hey, I should learn how to swim before I jump in the lake. I really just go, well, I hope I don't drown.
Well, and you approach everything with that confidence, and that's how you learn, right?
Sure.
And there were certain things that we learned the hard way on that. But I never felt for a second that either one of you didn't have it completely in control.
Well, and I will say the day, so JJ's house was one of the primary locations. We shot for 2 full days in the house, which may have been 2 of the happiest days of my filmmaking life so far.
It was so fun.
It's because I think we had like 13 or 14 guys who were all playing various former U.S. presidents.
Tucker,
go ahead.
Do you remember sitting down with the Book of Presidents and just trying to find doppelgangers? That's how we found those people.
Yep.
We're just like, this kind of looks like Dave. Well, we can.
Well, and I remember too, because we knew it immediately that we wanted Scott Horvick to play Abraham Lincoln, because that man is a treasure, and he looks nothing like Abraham Lincoln at all.
Like the least of anyone that we know.
Yeah. and David Winterstein is tall and gangly like Abraham Lincoln, but we looked at him and we were like, no, he's Andrew Jackson. There's no way he's not Andrew Jackson. And I think the versions of the presidents that we got are the versions that I always think of near and dear in my heart. By the way, I'd also like to say to Scott Horvick and Lori Horvick, for the good of the record, it was not my idea to make you look like you were Amish in your regular life. I had said to Amber, hey, listen, we can just get a fake beard for Abraham Lincoln. It doesn't have to look good. And Amber was the one who was like, no, he's dyeing his hair. We can get him to do it. It's going to look great. That was your doing.
Well, and poor Scott.
I was happy that you did it.
Because we got all gung-ho, and we did about 3/4 of the thing pretty quick, like in the first couple weeks. And then you guys burned out, and we took a good hiatus. It was like maybe 3-4 weeks, and poor Scott had to stay full Lincoln the whole time in his real life. He had to stay with that beard and the hair.
If you watch the movie, the beard and hair length changes from scene to scene. But having all of those presidents in JJ's house, JJ was playing President Taft.
Mm-hmm.
We had Steve Poitras as Martin Van Buren. I mean,
oh God, Martin Van Buren was one of my favorite. The moment when his delivery, when he's got the laser gun in the yard and he goes, "What the hell? I don't know what the hell this is." It makes me laugh every time.
Yep.
My God.
You know, and it's great. It's great too as a time capsule because some friends of ours who are unfortunately no longer with us are also in that movie. We've got Matthew Burkholder playing. I think he was playing. Who was he playing?
I remember. I remember him as the teacher, but I don't remember which president he was.
He was also the teacher. Hank Kachuk played Ulysses S. Grant.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
He was a spitting image of Ulysses S. Grant. So yeah, it's just a really fun time capsule of a great time in our lives. And the movie is technically finished. We did have a screening of it. People who were involved with it were given DVDs of it. And at some point, I want to revisit it and put it online again once I can re-get permission from POS out of Minneapolis for the usage of his song, because we use his song Teddy Bear and a Taser for the presidential party. And it's been cut to that song, and I would never want to change that song. I did get permission from him to use it in an email, which has since been lost. And I reached out to him and said, "Hey, man, I'm this student filmmaker based out of Fargo. Can I use your song? I'm not going to, sell this or anything like that. I just need the song is awesome." And he wrote back, "Sure, man, go for it." And if I could find that email again, I would feel confident with putting it out there in the public. But at the same time, too, it is not the best encapsulation of my abilities as a filmmaker. So, that was a 2006 film. A lot of time has passed since then. So
it was such a great experience, though. It really was.
It was fun.
And how nice of you to say, you know what, I think it was a really great moment of sort of coming of age for all of us as artists. And I still talk about that thing. And I wish I looked that young.
I think of it as, you can only do something like that at that point in your life. Could you imagine trying to do that now, Amber, with a family and with other obligations? Most of us had part-time jobs. You were earning enough money to pay your rent, and then you love to do these little side projects. I couldn't fathom now thinking like, okay, so we're going to spend all weekend shooting. Like, well, when am I supposed to do my podcast? And when am I supposed to do my chores around the house? And I'm supposed to be going to this event and
spend time with your family.
So I'm so thankful. And every now and then I will still pop in my Mercedes Rae DVD, and think fondly of all of that time. And
of course, I'm talking about music rights. You guys are dancing to the electric slide.
Yeah.
I mean, how am I supposed to get the rights to that thing?
There are just so many great memories of the whole process, and great memories of Matthew.
Oh yeah.
And I there's so many moments that I love because they just sort of happened. And we didn't really plan them. Like I was doing the art direction, and I bought all those cheesy party decorations for the party, and they were so dumb. There was like streamers and shit. And it became a great scene of them trying to decorate the party with these streamers, and they're like taping, and it's Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson and all these guys in costume like hanging streamers and blowing up balloons, and it was so fun. Yeah. It was just so goofy and ridiculous. And
my favorite single moment in that, you've got Steve Poitras with the ray gun.
Oh,
my favorite part is Tucker does this tracking shot throughout the entire main floor of, at the time, my mother's house, the house I grew up in. It's now my house. And it's kind of showing like, hey, these people are playing cards in the kitchen, and then this is happening in this room. And it goes into the living room, and there's a Nintendo 64 hooked up and sitting cross-legged on the floor. I can't remember who both of them are, but one of them was our Jimmy Carter.
It was Jimmy Carter.
It was Jimmy Carter and Martin Van Buren, I think, are the two who are playing video games.
Neither of these guys really had like a reference for how to use a controller to begin with, and so it looks so natural of like what two people who have no idea how the video game works, and it glides right. It doesn't stop. It glides right past them. But I loved that, and they're both have this giant smile on their face. You never see what they're playing. It is just this wonderful little moment.
And
Greg Carlson's playing President Hoover, who's watching over the punch bowl and making sure no one's spiking the punch bowl. FDR and Ulysses S. Grant are having an arm wrestling match.
I forgot the old wheelchair.
Yes. Yeah. Do you remember when we were trying to so the gorilla comes to the house and chases all the presidents outside? Yep. And because Mercedes brings the gorilla back. And so JJ comes, and oh God, that moment was so amazing. They're all sitting around playing like craps or something on the card table in the living room, around on the coffee table, and JJ comes running in and slams his hands down on the table, and everything flies up, and they all freeze for just this second because no one had seen him in the costume yet, and it was like this moment of what the hell. Yeah. And then they all start running, and they run outside, and so we're trying to get Dana, who's FDR, out of the house in that wheelchair, and it won't go, and they're pushing him, and he just throws the blanket off and gets out and runs outside, and it was such a great moment. It was
the idea that FDR's been faking it. He can actually
so many
walk.
Great accidents. And I remember that moment you're talking about, JJ, with them playing with the controllers, because Dave Scheer, he's not an actor. We had to convince him to do that because he looks just like Jimmy Carter. And so he's sitting there, and you can't hear the audio because there's music over it, but he just kept going, gotcha again. Remember that, Tucker? And so whenever I watch it, I just hear him going, gotcha again.
Oh man, and that also has some other theater history to it too, because we shot a bunch in the basement of at the time what was the theater on Main Avenue, which has been taken over by another business now. And so it's such a time capsule for us and all of our friends at that time that Mercedes Rae versus the former presidents of the United States of America has a very close, dear place in my heart.
Oh, forever. I love it. You talk about that basement, and here's my question. We shot in JJ's house, which is a beautiful house, colorful and lovely and nice, and a real house with a table and a couch. Yeah. But she supposedly the basement of that house was some dungeon from hell, and that's where she chose to spend her time instead of her actual nice house upstairs. Well, that's right. You say the kid lives there. That's how that ended.
It turns out that she's renting the basement from a family,
right?
And there's all sorts of leaps of logic that we ended up taking with that movie. That I tried to explain at one point because the whole kid living there, the bookend of the movie with Chris Berger. That came later because I was like, God, I shot a punch of this not knowing how this movie actually worked, thinking I did, and then realizing way after the fact that I didn't. Scope creep is something that happens a lot in media in general. And I had yet to really learn that lesson, which I should have learned in high school when I made Resurrex, because that was just the absolute worst case of scope creep in the world. Also, there are Resurrex characters in Mercedes Rae because of that classroom scene. So, many of the movies that I've made, I've Kevin Smith them where they're sort of sharing the same universe too. So characters who are related to each other appear in different things. But Mercedes Rae,
bring back old lady Mercedes Rae at some point.
Yeah,
elderly.
There you go. I like that idea.
I think if I recall, we were, and that was what that big hiatus was about. Is we didn't know how it started, how it ended. And if I recall, you met Chris Berg and thought, this guy's hilarious. He's got to be in this movie. And so you kind of wrote that for him.
Yeah, I wrote that for him. I had met Bjorn Peterson around that same time. So it really was by the seat of my pants kind of a thing.
Well, and there's so much even today that you couldn't get away with. Like, I can't imagine that the school system would have been cool with you coming in to do that nowadays. I mean, there's so many more legal pieces and, you know, access to the building. And certainly letting adults who don't have children who go to that school have free reign over whole sections of it. And so it is, you know, Tucker used the word little time capsule, but it is a perfect representation of a time in my life that I look back at fondly and I think of with, you know, only smiles. And so I'm very happy leading up to the premiere at the Fargo Theater, which was just a blast because so many people came out, and getting to listen to the laughter and not having anyone come out and be like, well, hey, man, I mean, I got a lot of respect for you for making something, but
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely a much different reception than I received for Resurrex. That's for damn sure.
Right.
But also, I think that the audience understood the spirit of it. That we were basically kids having fun. It was a free screening, so we weren't charging anyone at the door to come in. And we packed the Fargo Theater. We had just about a full house.
And it was so full of local celebrities that honestly, when you watch it, nobody said no, Tucker. Everybody we asked to play a president or to be part of that film, and there were a lot.
Yeah, I think the cast is close to 20 or 25 people, if not more.
And so it was a real delight for everybody to see those celebrities pop up. And I will say, JJ, you said, you know, it's a time capsule for a part of your life that was so great. It was sort of the last years, at least for me, and I'm a little bit older than you guys, but for me, it was sort of the last years of my life that weren't complicated. You know, it was sort of the last years of my life where I wasn't an adult, but I wasn't a kid. And so I could make my own decisions and do my own thing and screw up. And like you said, we didn't have full-time jobs. I didn't have to worry about mortgages and kids being sick and, you know, appointments. We just lived and we had a blast. And it's the only time in my life, and I know this, I think I always knew it, that I would see my face on a screen that size. And for me, as an actor, that's a huge honor because not everybody even gets that, you know, so... Thank you.
Speaking of time capsule, I mean, that thing was shot on mini DV tape. I mean, that is an obsolete format. Like, they don't make those anymore. So it was even just technologically a time capsule. Like, Facebook wasn't really a thing yet.
No,
it was around, but MySpace was where the action was at that point.
Yeah.
I also think too, one important lesson I learned from that is if you agree to be in a friend's movie, you need to absolutely make sure that there is a budget for washing the costumes. Somebody who's in charge of it. Because by the end, that gorilla suit was unthinkable. And it really, you know, Amber, your costume never changed either. So you had to continually wear that jumpsuit in, you know, in the hot blaring sun, in the dank basement.
Oh, make no mistake. I took that home and washed it between every set. Yeah, no, because you based that costume on April O'Neil. That's a little piece of fan trivia. Yeah. And it was too small for me, like exponentially. I'm not small. And it was very small. So I just squeezed my fat ass into that costume every day. And it would just wedgie the hell out of me because it was so small. And I had to run in it, and I had one eye. And I remember we shot this scene of the presidents chasing me down to the basement to try to get Lincoln back to the theater. And I had to run down the stairs. And Tucker was shooting our feet coming down the stairs, and I kind of jumped the railing. And I am not coordinated on a good day, let alone in this tiny suit with the one eye and combat boots. And it was so hard. And that was kind of the only time in the whole process, Tucker, that you got mad at me because we kept shooting it, and you said, "Why are you so awkward?" And I said, "I don't know, dude. I can't do it." So I don't even think you used it, but we shot it about 50 times.
I highly doubt it was you that I was upset about. I was probably just at the end of my rope going, I'll never be a filmmaker. I suck. I'm a hack. This is not going to work.
But it did work. Even though they threw out our time machine, remember that? Somebody threw it out of the basement.
Then that's right. And we had luckily shot all the interiors with it, but I hadn't even... I didn't even realize that I needed you to be talking to the computer that's in the time machine. So we ended up getting Jeff Casper to be the voice of the time machine. And there was just a million different things we could talk about with that.
Dorothy.
It's almost its own.
That was
Dorothy.
the name of the computer, Dorothy.
Because you are a Wizard of Oz fan.
Mm-hmm. And we made, and then at the very end, JJ and I are in the time machine, and he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt as the gorilla, and he's got a blender, and he's shoving full bananas, peel and all, into the blender. Yeah. And we're gonna, and he's like hitting me with his fingers, and we're like, oh yes, we're going on a journey. I don't know where the hell we went after that, but
yeah, you and Bananas, you went to the future because you'd always gone into the past, but you had this time machine, and you were like, you know what? Maybe I'm sick of the past. I think you go to the year 5000 or something like that.
That was so great. So
yeah,
great.
I've got some notes on the writing of that, Tucker, that one day we'll dedicate a podcast to. Okay, so Amber, now that everyone knows a little bit about the background of you, Tucker, and I spending a summer together making a movie, let's talk a little bit about you yourself. I've always known you as an artist and a passionate artist. How did your love for the theater and creation, where did that come from?
Wow, that's a great question. So my life has taken a bizarre journey of chance in a lot of ways, and it's funny. I'm not humble. I really I value myself very highly, and so I'm excited to be on your podcast. But also, I hope anybody finds anything I have to say interesting at this point. I'm literally right now a mom in my pajamas sitting in my camper to avoid my children. So that's where my life has gone. But so true story. I was a shy kid, and I was never really an artsy kid because we're not a real artsy family. My mother's family, we kind of grew into that later, but I was very shy, and my mom made me go to college, and I didn't want to. It wasn't a thing I wanted to do. But she made me. She started back at college at the same time I did and said if I dropped out, she would. So I went to school, and I did a few classes, and I knew I could never survive 4 years of sitting in a lecture. I knew I couldn't do it. I was barely going to class. I was failing, and I hated it. And so I took as an elective an acting 1 class. And the instructor of that, Dan Rogers, I always described it as he reached into a closet and pulled the cord and turned the light on. And it was like my future just hit me in the face. And it was the only thing ever that I can recall since being a kid that aside from The Wizard of Oz, maybe, that I ever truly lived. And so I spent a lot of time learning the craft, and it turned out I was pretty good at it. And I fought really hard, and I wanted to get better. And, I was wrought with emotion and angst like every other good actor in college, and just really worked really hard to get better. And I also learned very quickly, once I started coming out of my shell, because theater will do that, that I could get through school not sitting in a desk, but laying on a floor and making noise, which is what you do in theater school. And B, that I'm good at making friends, and I'm good at meeting people, and I'm good at getting into the right place when I need to be there. And so that's how I sort of met the Theater B crowd, and we founded that company, and I just kind of started making myself part of things. I kept saying, you're going to do this with me. This is what we're going to do. And I feel like that's kind of how Mercedes Rae happened, and that's how college happened in Theater B. And I went on to do a little bit of film work. I worked as an art director on a feature. I had no qualifications to do that. I just said, I'm here and I'm going to do it. And that's sort of how I've always done things. I've said, I'm here, I can do this. And I've learned as I've gone. And as my career sort of post-college started to happen, I realized, much kind of based on everything I've just said, that I'm a better producer and director and administrator than I am an actor. Not that I'm not a fine actor, but I'm better at that position of planning and building an authority. And so I really just kind of went down the administrative path. And I loved it. I've produced dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of pieces. I've not acted much in the last 10 years or so, but I've learned a lot about promotion and production and direction, and I've become a pretty damn good director, I think. And so that's sort of where I've gone creatively. But I do miss acting, and I love it. And someday maybe I'll I'll try it again when my kids
Well,
are here.
and Amber's selling herself a little bit short here. Amber is a legit, really good actor, like legit, really, really good. Which was one of the reasons why I was like, I like this Amber lady, and she's going to be the lead in this play.
Which
Or
was
not
my
play,
greatest honor.
this movie. Yeah. I mean, I fell in love with you around the time that I fell in love with Scott Horvick and the people at Theater B, and Theater B, which continues to this day. I've been an ensemble member with Theater B since 2007. So, the theater crowd of people that I fell in with after high school, that was really my post high school education, was sort of the trials by fire. But I think that's one thing that Amber and I have in common. And JJ, you have this in common too, is that, maybe not totally formal education for all of us, but really we've learned by just going, hey, let's try this thing. And we have the ability to survive it and learn from it and do better the next time.
And isn't it great? I think it's such a, and again, this is going to seem a little braggadocious, but I think all three of us are in the same boat. There's certain people like us that might not have ever done something or really know how, but if presented with the opportunity, we're going to be the one to figure it out. And I hope none of us ever lose that quality, because that's, I think, what makes us, like the current job I have. So I'm out of the arts now. I got out when my kids were small, and I always made fun of people that did that. Like, you're going to give up your whole career.
The money's so good in the arts, though, Amber. The money's so good in the arts. I can't believe you would leave it.
To be honest, I could have done it financially. The place I was working, I was an exec at a theater company, and it just was very hard. It was very not job hard. It was emotionally difficult. It was a stressful environment. It was not the kind of work I'm used to doing and the work I know I'm capable of. And it became a balance of my sanity and my children. So I was like, I gotta sell out. So I did. But the job I currently have, I have no qualifications to do. I just said I can do it. Here's me. I made, and I think that's the great part about growing up in the arts, is you can really kind of figure anything out. You've done so many bizarre things. You've made a time machine out of a tent in someone's basement. You can figure out how to promote somebody's program. So yeah, that's I know I just rambled on and on, but that's sort of the journey I took, and I fully intend at some point in my life to get back into it in a big way. So stay tuned.
Just hang out, everyone. The next act is coming. But Amber, I'm gonna kind of piggyback on what you were saying. I love being in shows, and I love doing that stuff. But as I get older, and as I share my life with somebody else and with children, and you realize, being a part of any kind of arts group, whether you're creating, you're painting, you're directing, it takes a lot of time. It doesn't happen overnight. And so, like when I did Santaland Diaries at Theater B, I promised Jill, I was like, listen, I know that literally we get married on a Saturday and I start rehearsals on a Monday.
And that's life.
Yep.
But I promise you that I will dedicate my time to you afterwards. And then I got a call being like, hey, would you like to direct this thing for us at FMCT? And I said, well, yeah, I really would. And I didn't tell her for a couple of months, and somebody approached me like, hey, I hear you're directing Flanagan's Wake. And I was like, oh no,
boy.
It's out of the bag. But she understands fully, and I think this is I'm curious to know, Amber, was your husband in the arts as well? Yes,
my husband is a musician,
so he understands that
for sure. And he, when I was working at the stage, and he's a full-time musician. That's what he does. So he's gone every weekend, sometimes on the road. And when I was at the stage and he was playing on the road, we just figured it out. But when kids came, it was a really different deal. And like you said, JG, you got married on a Saturday and you started on a Monday. I think people don't necessarily know that about this life. I did not. This is true. Tucker, you and I did Hamlet together, right? Were you in Hamlet?
No, Macbeth. We just did Hamlet at Theater B at the beginning of this past season.
So I was thinking it was with Undiscovered Country. It must have been right before you started. We did Hamlet. I
Yeah, that's
literally
right.
did not go to my father's funeral because we were in Hamlet. I couldn't miss the performance to be at my father's funeral.
Wow.
And so, and that's a lot more complicated scenario than just all that, but you miss a lot in your life and you sacrifice a lot in your life to make art. It's almost impossible to have full-time art life and full-time family life unless you're willing to do less of one, to not do one as well as the other. And
Well, and especially like, if you have a full-time job, that means that you're probably rehearsing in the evenings. And so
yes,
like a typical rehearsal schedule is going to be, you've got your full-time job until, 5 in the evening. And then 6:30, 7 o'clock is when you're going to start rehearsals, and you're doing that until 10 at least.
right.
And you're doing that probably 5 days a week for 5 weeks. And then you've got 4 weekends of shows, and it is a massive time commitment. But one thing that does, though, is you find the people who truly love to do it, because if you didn't love doing it, you wouldn't be there.
Yeah, you have to want to give up the other things in your life. You have to want to know that if your mom gets sick, you may not be able to be there for them in the same way that you would if you didn't have this commitment, because the show must go on as a thing, because life continues to happen while all of this stuff is in process. And if you bail, you've let down everyone. And so it's sort of an unwritten creed that you take when you start doing this, that I'm sorry, you have to understand that this is my life and this is how my life goes. And it's hard for people to get that. You're always juggling your personal life with your theater life, with your arts life. So now what I do now is about once every other year I direct a show at our college here, and that's sort of my lifeline to keep breathing. But even then, with one show, 6 weeks of rehearsal, it's too much time away from my children, and you can start to feel it. And it turns out I really like them. Like, I always thought I wouldn't care, like whatever, they'll be fine. But I like them, and I like spending time with them. So it's when they're big enough to be at the theater space, reading books or playing on their iPad, like Scott or like Torin and Linka and Cameron did in the early days of Theater B, the Winterstein and Horvick kids, I'll revisit it, because I think you can't ever really get away from it. It's sort of part of who you are.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. And, I think, you hear a lot on this podcast about, being someone who wants to create and make something. But, the same goes for people who own small businesses,
Sure.
people who are just following any kind of a dream out there. I've become friends with a gentleman who's a pastor, and his passion is for being out in nature, and he does these 500-mile hikes, and that take days and days and days. And I listen to him, and you can listen to that passion, but that's the same thing. It takes you away from family, and it takes you away from being able to binge watch the latest thing on Netflix, and there's no shame
Right.
or shade being thrown there at all. It's the choices that you make, right? Some people are very happy making the choice of, like, listen, my dream was to own a boat, and now I own a boat, and I'm going to be damn well using that boat every chance I get.
Right.
Amen, brother. You keep going, buddy. So I find just anybody who follows their dream, follows their passion, more power to you, and just keep doing it. And I have noted that during the COVID-19 pandemic, people are doing that. They found like, okay, well, I've got time on my hands now, because as it turns out, you can slow down a clock of the daily activities. And I got back into woodworking, and look, I've made 5 cheese boards over the last month, or whatever it turns out to be. And I just think, like, God, that's awesome. Good for you. I want to make a cheese board. Oh,
And I hope people are using this time for that. I really do. You said that you find that the clock can slow down for daily activities. That's been the biggest thing for me, is I realized we don't need to run as much as we thought we did. Like that we're home every night and most weekends together, and I haven't hated it. I hate that thousands of people every day are dying. That sucks. I'm really not okay with that, but that's a different conversation. I'm such a doer and a runner, and I'm so busy all the time. It's been really amazing to just sit down for a little bit and see my
It's
kids.
interesting because it forced you to do that.
You're right.
I keep telling myself, you know what? I'm going to take a week off in the summer and I'm going to catch up on house projects. But before you know it, I found other things to occupy that time and be like, I should really get that blog written and I should do. And so all of a sudden that week goes by and I'm like, oh, I never hung that door I meant to do. And
Right.
but this time it forced you. It almost felt like being grounded. And I mean, my God, I finished books that I was working on. I've been cooking so much more at my home. I agree that this is a horrific situation, and I consider myself very lucky, and I've been healthy this whole time, and that's just phenomenal. And I know that others have not been nearly as lucky, but man, I am gonna look back at this time and say, I made use of it. I did what I was supposed to do during this time, and I'm gonna come out of this not being the same person I was on March 1st.
And can't we all hope that what comes out of this is not, and I've seen a lot of people say this, and it's tough to articulate it to each individual, but we don't want to go back to normal. Normal was hard. We were I don't know, selfish and busy and angry and materialistic and all of these bad things that we had got, this rut we'd gotten into, what we thought we needed, as Americans. And maybe we don't have to be that way. Maybe it's okay just to build a fort with your kids, or like you said, JJ, like, I'm going to make this meal at home, and I'm not going to run 7 times to Menards because I don't need to.
We don't realize how addicted to distraction we have become.
Yes.
And we're we're basically walking around with digital crack in our pockets all the time, and we're always looking for the next thing. And I think one thing that, even though I still have that, right, that's still with me, and I live alone with just some cats and some goldfish. And so one thing that I've had to really become better at is learning how to be present and to be okay with being present, to not constantly seek out distractions, because you can only distract yourself so much when you're just cooped up in an apartment all day long.
Right.
And so, being able to, and also the break from fast food that I've taken since I'm now cooking everything. Like, I've lost a ton of weight. I feel a lot better just in general. And I kind of realized that, that on the go mentality, sometimes it's necessary because of what you might have to accomplish in the short term, but we've all just become so addicted to it being the norm that we allow bad habits to take over and define us.
Absolutely. And we get kind of lazy, and we rely on our creature comforts. Like you said, 3 times a week I would drive through somewhere because I worked too hard and I was too tired to come home and cook. I couldn't face it. And yeah, we're eating healthy. We work out as a family 4 times a week, which, don't make that sound like we're like those people. It's honestly 10 minutes of a kid workout. My kids are whining the whole time, so it's not as great as it sounds. But we've tried to establish better habits now that we have the luxury of looking at what we're doing wrong, as a culture and as a family. It's been great. I've been back to my office. It was a week yesterday that I've been back to my office, and the first day, obviously I was nervous and masked and gloved, and went straight to my office and locked myself in and decontaminated with Lysol. And then I got home and I walked in the door and I just started sobbing. Tommy's like, "What?" Tommy's my husband. He's like, "What is wrong?" And I said, I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to walk in here and feel tired and see you frustrated because you've been chasing kids all day, and then we're too tired to eat well, so I throw hot dogs in the water and some mac and cheese. Like, I don't want that anymore, And so I think it's a big eye opener. I'm trying to find a little bit of, and again, to not sound too American and bougie, but some self-care, and to try to find a balance between how things used to be, how things became, and where we're headed, which I think remains to be seen for everybody on the planet. I don't think any of us know,
I think that what struck a chord with me with what you were talking about, Amber, was just choosing what you go back to, right?
Mhm.
Because we fall into these ruts, and that's the whole point of a rut, is it's difficult to get out of. And a rut isn't a bad thing. It can be, I come home every single day and I walk my dogs and I get to play catch with my kid, and so that rut fulfills you in that way. It's your routine, is probably a nicer way of saying it. But then there's also those side things, like, gosh, I find myself I'm feeling stressed, so I started having a beer a night, and now I'm drinking 4 beers a night, um, because I'm not processing what's going on at work, and I'm bringing it home with me, and I'm stressed and I'm sad. Or, gosh, all I want to do on the weekends is just sleep because I feel like I'm not catching up on anything. And going back to it, I know one of the first things I'm going to do going back to it is I intend to not drive my car as much. I intend on trying to really, like, if this finally forced me, it's like, get my bike out. My job is a 10-minute bike ride or a 6-minute car ride away from my house. So why not take my bike? And, it's going to make me feel a little healthier. It's going to help me save. I can't believe the amount of money I'm saving during this time. It just because retail therapy is a part of it, right? So I would convince myself, oh, you need to go to the hardware store. You gotta stop at Menards today, and you pick up that hinge that you need to do. And when that's taken away from you, gosh, I mean, I feel bad for the people who've lost their jobs or who are furloughed, and my heart really does go out to you. And I've been lucky enough to stay in my job this whole time, and I'm finding that I'm saving money, and I'm not spending, I was filling up my gas tank once a week, and now I can't even tell you the last time I filled up my gas tank.
Right. I bet it's been 6 weeks since I put gas in my car.
Right. And so it's just, we gotta learn what the future is going to be. And I think that's just, and that's fine. That's great.
Right. And like you said, not everybody's in that same situation. I know for most people on earth, most Americans are one paycheck away from homelessness. And I feel for that. And I'm certainly not out of that range. We can't take a hit. If I lost my job, we'd be in trouble. But when this all started, Tom, who's a musician, he plays every weekend. Overnight, there was no gigs. So thousands of dollars a month income just went away. And we didn't plan for it. We didn't prepare for it. It just was gone. And I was in a panic. I said to myself, how are we going to do this? I can't take your bills. I can't. Like, I can't do everything on my income. I can barely get by on what I'm paying for, which is about 3/4 of the bills because I make more. And that's important for this podcast. I am the breadwinner of my family. But anyway, I'm just kidding. It turns out, like you said, JJ, I paid all of the bills. And then at the end of the pay period, I had money left in my account. None of those things have ever happened before. And I was like, how? We didn't spend a dime. In the 2 weeks that we were home, we didn't spend anything. We did not fill gas. We did not eat out. We did not, like you say, make a run to Menards. We didn't take the kids to Pizza Ranch to play video games. We didn't do any of that. And you don't necessarily think that you're living outside of your means until you really live within them. And it's amazing what you don't need. It's amazing. And we want for nothing. We're fine. It's a really important lesson. And my kids haven't missed a beat. They know, my oldest, he's 7. He knows what's going on because he's not in school and he misses his friends and he's afraid enough. He hears everything else everybody else hears, but he loves being home with us. He doesn't ask, can we go to the mall? He doesn't say, can we go to Sky Zone or play in the bouncy? He doesn't ask for any of that. He just loves being with us. And I think if everybody just takes a step back and breathes and just focuses on your 4 walls, you're going to be all right. Because that's really all we can do.
Unless one of your walls is bleeding, in which case you have trouble. You're living
then
in
you
a
have to go to
house.
Menards.
Yeah, you need to call the Ghostbusters and pay whatever bill they throw your way.
Yeah, you probably need to get a hold of previous guest Jody Harvella and get your house cleansed in that way. But I do, Amber, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying, and we just have to remind ourselves that all the time. You hear it once, and that's great. You file it away in your brain, but it needs to become like a daily mantra and a
Mhm.
reminder. And I'm a big fan of the way that people communicate with children and say, like, yeah, you're having feelings, and it's important to have those feelings, and you don't have to be happy all the time. There are things that are going to make you mad. There's things that are going to make you sad. There are going to be things that make you confused. And just let's figure it out. Let's work from there and figure out. Gosh, why are you sad? And could we do something to prevent you from being sad? Or is this just part of what you have to work through? And
Right.
I think that applies to people and their life as they go on as well. And I also think too, we're going to see some amazing bring this back to theater. We're going to see some amazing scripts come
Oh,
out of
yeah.
this time, I
I
think.
can't wait. I can't wait. We were talking
Um,
about this on the B show that I did. We talked about that sort of, this is going to change the scope of the world and how we see the world and the
right.
history of our generation. And it's this is our Great Depression moment, and we get
We're
to
li-
choose how we rise out of it.
yeah, we're living through a demarcation point.
Hmm.
That life will be forever changed. We'll still be able to see each other again, and some version of our previous life will be back. I mean, it's already slowly coming back, but we will never be able to forget these lessons. I would hope, at the very least. I mean, bad habits do die hard, and the comfort of those bad habits are going to be a siren song for many of us, for sure. But I am in the same boat as you guys, and I've reevaluated my relationship with money and with food and with time and with art and with the distractions that I was allowing myself to spend and basically waste the time and money on. And it's gotten me to refocus on other things which are far more important and feed the soul in a much better way. So I'm really excited too for the kind of art that will be coming out of our artists once this is all done. Hopefully it won't all just be COVID-19 art though. Like,
No, it'll
I
be
hope,
self-reflective, I hope.
right.
And to circle back to the whole being theater people, and JJ, what you were saying about sort of the scripts, and Tucker, you're talking about how we view ourselves. And I'm just spitballing here, so bear with me. I haven't really thought this through. JJ, you were talking about how we let kids assess their feelings and kind of walk them through their world based on how they're feeling about things. And we forget to do that as adults. We don't necessarily look inside. We react, we respond, we feel justified in our actions. We don't take a lot of time for self-reflection, and I think this period has kind of forced us to do that, forced to hold up the mirror. My question is, my thoughts here is, what do you guys think? Do you think that we have an advantage as artists to have the ability to do that, and have always sort of had the ability to do that? Because when you go through theater school or you work on a show, when you work with good artists, your heart's on your sleeve, and your vulnerability is sort of part of the craft, and it becomes who you are. And do you think we have an advantage, and do you think that will change what art looks like because we've had this time to, I guess I'm not sure fully what I'm trying to ask. Is
Yep.
that landing?
Let me take my interpretation of what you're asking. I think that this instance has changed the way we consume art. So take what you guys are doing with Theater B, right? With these Be at
Mhm.
Home.
Uh-huh.
You had to adapt what you do to keep engaging with your audience. And I think that that is something that is going to have to continue for the way Theater B approaches the outside world. If you're a painter and you paint and you have a gallery show, I couldn't imagine going to an art gallery opening right now with 250 other people packed into a small all
Right.
brick room. um I would love to consume that, but maybe I'm going to have to consume it in some form of a digital way. So are we talking about, gosh, I've painted something. I don't just want to scan it and have a virtual gallery. How are we going to figure out a way for you to capture the texture, the layers of that art piece so that I can see it from what I would consider a safe distance, whatever my personal safe distance happens to be? And I think that's a real thing. I think museums were really smart to put up virtual walkthroughs during this time,
Right.
because people want that. People crave it. They need to be a part of that culture and that history, and that gave them the ability to do that. I really think that we've hit, it's everything's changed. And so we have to adapt to what that new change is going to be. So let's say the audience for a show, you can only seat 50 people at a time in a show. Well, that's drastically going to change how much you bring in ticket cost, or in ticket revenue. So are you going to up the amount of cost on the tickets, or is it going to have to be some kind of thing where we now are negotiating rights with some of these companies that hold the rights to them, and say, like, gosh, we're going to have 4 physical performances and 2 virtual performances of this piece. I think that'll be the big nut to crack, to say, how can we still include audience members, patrons, whatever they happen to be, and allow them another way to consume this if they don't feel comfortable consuming it in a different way. And it's not just it's not just putting a webcam at the back of a theater, right? Like, it's never gonna feel the same watching a live theatrical performance on my computer at my home as it is when I'm sitting in the house. And I think that companies are going to have to address that fact and say, okay, so how can we engage them in this virtual performance in a way that that will pull at their heartstrings a little bit more, that will really, get the emphasis of what we're trying to convey. And thank God there are smarter people than me out there, because I would not have any idea on how to start that. Oh boy.
Well, we're still trying to figure that out right now at Theater B. Our current theater seats roughly about 100 people. And we're at this point where we had our season picked out for next season, which a season for us is usually starts in August and ends in May. And we have to revisit the drawing board for a number of reasons, one of which is because of the lost revenue, because we had to cancel our last show. We're still not quite sure what sort of budgetary situation we're going to be in, let alone that we don't know what the impact of a second wave of coronavirus or a third wave is going to be. And if you think of a 100-seat house, there's a very real possibility that we won't even be allowed to fill that more than 30% with people. And so, we're still going, like, right now we're basically adopting plans A, B, and C, and we don't quite know what it's going to be next season. We're still figuring all of those things out. And, maybe, online revenue through digital streams or something it would be one of the options, but we just don't know. And we don't know how long it's going to take. It's already hard enough to make money in the theater, which is why most of us, unless you're like a big Broadway theater house in New York, most of us are nonprofits, because it doesn't scale in the same way that mass media does. You can only fit so many people into seats, in a house in a weekend at a time. And in a smaller market like the Fargo-Moorhead area compared to a larger market like the Twin Cities or Chicago or New York City, it's a good thing we love doing what we're doing, because otherwise, if we were in it for the money, we're in it for the wrong reasons. And that's difficult enough without there being a pandemic.
Well,
now we're now experiencing it with the pandemic.
There's huge challenges in those tier 1 markets too. The Chicago theater just announced that its seasons they're not going to happen. There won't be a next season, and I'm sure that's happened in New York, although I can't confirm that. But that's going to be, a lot of those aren't coming back, because you don't have the luxury, and having run a theater for a long time, you miss one show, you are done now. And it doesn't matter if you're around 25 years. If you don't have that revenue, you can't float to the next project. But and kind of going back to where I started with this about sort of us having an advantage, I've been stunned by how quickly the arts community adapted to this, and how, without almost missing a beat, theaters were performing online, stand-up comics were doing open mics, art galleries were selling stuff, through different Instagram portfolios and things like that, and people were still pushing on. And if there's one thing theater people can do, it's do a show with no budget.
Right.
And so as long as we, and JJ, like you were saying, like we got to figure out how to reach the audience, as long as consumers learn that they're not going to receive the information the same way they used to, and as long as we recognize that we're going to have to learn how to perform without the self gratification of an audience,
Right.
I think that we can bridge that gap, because I'm watching Theater B do it every week, and I'm seeing, we have a gallery in town of local artists that are doing really great stuff online, and I think we're nothing if not resilient. And I guess that's what I was sort of asking in the beginning. Can we as artists always figure out a way to survive? We clearly have since Dionysus, and B, do we as individuals have a certain built-in hardiness that makes us able to weather this emotionally in ways that maybe non-artist people can't?
Well, for certain, we've dealt with scarcity better just because we've had to. And often you just even in the idea of theater in general, people often will compare it to, say, film or television, because you've got actors and you've got an audience watching it. But so much is left up to what's usually called the theater of the mind, theater of imagination, suggestion. These are all tools in the theatrical toolkit. And so, you can put on a show with little to no set, with little to no costumes, with just actors. It might not be the thing you wanted to make, but there's a way of going about it where you can figure it out. And, even when we weren't under the pandemic, yeah, we may have had budgets, but those budgets were minuscule. They were next to non-existent. As it is, I'm just like, one thing we're lucky about that we're not is that, we're not in the restaurant business, which had a kind of overhead that is just going to be crippling. Like, I mean, I'm very, very lucky to still have my job doing video production for an ad agency. But we have literally never had unemployment like this in our country in its history,
Right.
ever. Not even close. And the kind of impact that that's going to have just on the general consciousness, I think people will be reaching out to art. I think of people who maybe never saw themselves as artists, who suddenly tried art in quarantine and are going to come out of it with a brand new voice. I'm really excited to see what those folks have to say, what they come up with, the kind of things that they're going to be making. And I hope that it leads to just a more general embrace of the arts in this country.
Oh, I hope so too. And I mean, arts always get us through crises. You ask anybody that's sitting in quarantine now, what if we took away your actors? What are you going to do? Or your musicians? How are you going to pass your time? And I think we have this advantage of being part of an elite group of people that can persevere. And, we like to whine about it and how poor we are and how hard we work, but we do, and we are. And, Tucker, when we started Theater B, nobody was getting paid. In fact, the five of us took money from our pockets and put our first season together with our own money. Mm-hmm. And we did it with black boxes and the clothes that we had in our closets. That was it. There was no walls. There was no, working scenery. There was black boxes and us. And extra furniture that we had in our basement if we needed it. And we did that whole first season that way. And we made really good theater.
Oh, it was fantastic.
And we continued to grow. And then Theater B went to a place where after, I don't know, it was 8 years, 10 years that Carrie finally got a paycheck. And then they finally started paying the company. But, that didn't happen overnight. That was a decade of blood, sweat, and tears and the support of a community. And, if we had to do it again, we could, I think.
Absolutely.
Not Carrie. I would not blame her if she's like, screw that. I put it away too much time. I'm not going back to nothing. And, and she got us that far. And, maybe it's someone else has to work the fields for a while. But not just be. I think everybody just needs to stay the course and try to minimize and bounce back in whatever way they can. And community, if you're listening, go support the places you love. Drop a donation to your theater company or your art gallery or your favorite craft brewer or mom and pop restaurant or boutique. Give them some love, because those people are the ones that are, their livelihood depends on the kindness of strangers, as Blanche would say.
Right. And let's not forget those improv troupes either. JJ, when was the last time Linebenders was able to do a show before the pandemic?
So I think like March 3rd was our last show.
Oof.
And then, just like your husband, Amber, everything disappeared, right? So at a time when people, we are deep into post-prom season, we would be in grad season right now, company picnics and conventions,
Yeah, this is
all
your
of
hot
this
time.
stuff just disappeared. And, what we did as a company was we decided, okay, listen, nobody is being hurt from this time-wise, because it's not like you took 4 days off of work so that we could go do, a convention in Vegas or something. So I was able to refund every deposit, because some of these are small groups. They're like, it's the Hunter, North Dakota Firefighters Fund, and they were going to have us out for a ladies' night. And so we refunded all of the deposits. And all I asked people was like, listen, if you reschedule your event, we would love to have you consider us again for this. So if it doesn't happen in March, but it turns out it's going to happen in November, it would be great if you thought of us. You're under no obligation to do so. But that being said, man, I have a lot of people who rely on that secondary income, and
Right.
this really hurt them. I'm paying what I think is probably the highest artist wage for performance outside of like being in a band in North Dakota. Like our company, thank goodness, at almost 20 years old, is thriving. And
You've done amazing things with it, JJ. Kudos to you. It's been fun to
I'd
watch it come
yeah,
on the map like that.
and I'd love to take all the credit, but really it's the people who have been in it throughout the years. And I mean, at this point, we've had over 50 members of Linebenders come and go. And it's them willing to do it, because listen, if everyone said, you know what, no, I'm going to stay home. I'm done with this. I don't want to go to Ypsilanti at 3:00 in the morning and entertain 50 high school students. It would just be me, and I know I can't do it alone. So we've been very lucky in that, but that gig economy has it's disappeared. I think of people like Amy Klein. I think of even Randy Long, who used to do the singing telegrams. That would have disappeared as well. And there are a lot of people out there who are hurting really, really bad. And I also wonder if maybe the ponds have had a few fish who won't be back next season. I think of some companies who have overhead who can't maintain 6 months of not having any available income. When Trollwood canceled their year, I don't know what that does to their budget if they don't have any ticket sales or people coming out and buying a bag of popcorn. My God, I mean, yes, you're not paying wages, but that's the trickle down, right? So you're not hiring someone from Boston to come teach. And so they've lost that wage. And so they now have to look for a different apartment. And now that landlord is having trouble finding to fill that place. It is more than just, I can't go see a show.
Right.
It runs so much deeper. And that's my soapbox.
And Trollwood's not exempt, and I would assume people that are listening kind of know what that is, but Trollwood is a big company, and they have a lot of different facets to their business, but they're not exempt from the same hardships that a small company would be. Their budget and their income and expenses are pretty balanced. And you throw a monkey wrench like the huge box office revenue and enrollment revenue of an organization like Trollwood that is their functionality. They don't have that for a year. who's to say they can pay the full-time staff they have now? This isn't, again, I'm not making some judgment on Trollwood. I'm using them as an example for even large businesses that are still nonprofits and still community and local, that rely on that system of in and out that now is gone.
Right.
And if they cancel their concert series, there's like nothing left,
Yeah. Just today, the day we're recording this, the Guthrie has announced that they will remain shut down until March 2021 and have a limited small season after that. And so when you think about, and that's a major organization, right? That's cutting your potential revenue down by 3/4 to be shut down for a year. You're talking a full year. They were shut down in March, from March to March. And oof, I mean, I really wonder what that's going to do. And I think about the same for like the mom and pop shops that are out there. As we're recording this, it's opening fishing weekend in Minnesota, and there are a lot of businesses who make a great amount of money over the weekend by having anglers come in who need to buy everything from bait to beer, and they can't serve those people. The restaurants, the small town hotels and motels that are full of cars pulling fishing boats. It's so deep, and
all those lake towns that their whole season is May to August, and if that doesn't exist for them, there's nothing.
Right. So we're going to see repercussions from this for a long time, but I do think one of the things that's going to get us through this and help build what the new normal is are the artists, are the people who say, God damn it, I have got to find a way to create. I have got to find a way for people to engage what I'm creating, and I will find it. If I need to open up an outdoor art gallery, I will find a way to retrofit plexiglass and make it happen.
Right.
Amber, what a great conversation that went in a whole different direction than I anticipated. It'll be fun to
hear all day.
It's like listening to two different episodes from the beginning and talking about Mercedes Rae to what artists are doing post-pandemic. Just out of curiosity, do you want to give a pitch for anything at the end of this episode and let people know, gosh, this is something I'm passionate about, or this is something that people should be checking out?
I'm so out of the pulse of that community in a lot of ways, but arts wise, always give love to Bee. It has my heart. It always will. I was a proud, quiet little kid co-founder of Theater B, and came of age.
Quiet?
Yeah. Okay. People don't necessarily know that I was there at this point, but damn it, they're gonna know now. But they're always going to be my family. Y'all are always going to be my roots and where I came from, and the bar to which I hold everybody else. So give love to Bee, get them through this, because we've tried to be there for you, and we hope that you'll be there for us when the time comes. Also, just again, kind of what I said before, take care of the people in your community that work for your community. Don't worry about the big boxes. Don't worry about the franchises. They're gonna have what they're gonna make it, or they're not. But there's a lot of real people that turn the gears of the place you live. Get out and support them during this time, and stay connected to each other. Even if you can't give each other money, just reach out, do a FaceTime, send a text. Be brave and be tough, and be compassionate to each other, and stay close.
Tell us about Tommy's band. Are they going to be getting on the road again anytime soon, do you think, or are they available for bar mitzvahs?
They only do bar mitzvahs. It's funny that you bring that up. They're exclusively for Jewish children. Boys specifically. They don't do bat mitzvahs. They don't like girls. No, I don't know what the hell's going to happen. I don't know. And luckily, JJ, like what you said, is for most of these guys, it's not their full-time gig. So they're still working and doing their jobs, and they're going to be okay. Tommy, it is. He doesn't have a day job, and we're just sort of lucky that we have the circumstances we have. But we're hoping that when the time comes for One and Done, which is his band with my brother, and a couple of other guys, that they're going to get back to the festivals. They're looking at summer, and summer is a big time for them. Kind of like for Line Benders, they're going to, they travel to the outdoor street dances and the summer festivals and the community fests and stuff. And so they're just keeping their fingers crossed that they're going to have some place to play. So check them out, One and Done Band. And then he plays with another band called Frantic Anarchy that is, the name doesn't really do it justice. It's kind of this cool, like 90s playlist of everything you grew up with. They have a female front person and she just kills it. And so they're a lot of fun too, Frantic Anarchy. And we're just crossing our fingers. We've got dates on the books. We'll see if we can play them. And I just look forward to it being warm and sunny and normal. So hope to get back out to see a band soon. So when that time comes, support your local bands too, because they work hard. Not as hard as theater people, and they get way more glory. but they're pretty great. So
well, I know that I'm going to be buying like. I always am the guy who they're like, all right, and we'll be over at the merch booth if anyone wants to buy a T-shirt or one of our CDs. I'm going to be the guy who actually buys the CD this time and be like, hey guys, thanks for the concert. I really missed this. I don't have a CD player in my car anymore, but I'll track
no one does. No one does. Why are you selling these? I will say, JJ, I love comedians. I think stand-up comics are the most interesting people on earth, and I think that art form is the hardest, most thankless, amazing, and comics they hate themselves. It's just a fascinating piece of psychology. I always buy the comics T-shirt. So line vendors, comics, I will buy your shirt. You start playing for us, man, and I will buy your shirt. I promise. I'll buy your merch because I know how hard these guys are working, and I want those lives. It hurts to watch my artist friends, my comedy friends, my music friends saying, "I got nothing. I don't know what to do."
It's interesting you say that because we actually decided. So we're like, we got to start doing some merch, but what are we going to do? And one of the members suggested, why are we making T-shirts? Everyone's got enough T-shirts. If you don't have enough, you're not going to a comedy show to get a T-shirt. You're going to a JCPenney. And they go, what people don't have enough of that they realize? Pot holders. What if we sold pot holders at the end of the show? And I'm like, that is flipping brilliant. We'll monogram line benders on there. And because you're going to use it way more than you use a T-shirt probably. So,
sure.
Yeah, so we're launching pot holders.
Pot holders are great. And here's, as a mom, moms are really stupid. We buy things for our kids that they don't need because we like them. I don't know. It's a thing. I've had a few comics that have had baby onesies, but with like their inappropriate one-liners on them, and I've bought every single one of them. There was one that was, I think the comic was Mike Brody he had one that it was a dude, a baby holding up a beer. It said, "You smell like my dad. Cheers." And I bought that, so baby onesies are a great piece of merch for a comic. So keep that in your back pocket.
Well, I will definitely note that. Amber Rae, what a great conversation. What an amazing person. Thanks for making some time. And it feels like, even though I haven't seen you in years, we fell back right into the old routine.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for having me. This was a blast. And I truly love you guys. I miss the hell out of you. I hope you're staying well. And JJ, congrats on all of your great things that are coming for you in the last few years. And Tucker, it has been awesome to work with you again. I just miss the shit out of you. So
yeah, we'll find an excuse to work again together soon.
Please, let's do it. I just love you guys. And I feel more connected to the arts in the last 6 weeks than I have in a really long time. So for that, I thank you guys.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. I still have a couple of those Muscle Man magazines.